This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the G-Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a G-Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
Hey everybody, here we are on the G-Spot with our next special guest, Yolonda Cole-Jones. She is a woman that I have been super intrigued by for a while. She is such a force. She has really created her own world, supporting people through coaching. She is the force behind Empowered Journey Company. She also has something called Adorn Natural Hair and Beauty. She is a total creatrix. She has something she's creating called Mother Jones Music, YC Jones Photography, and Starseed Publishing. This Yolonda Jones creative enterprise is really helping people ignite inspiration, fueling their empowerment, stoking their authenticity, and cultivating healing in the world through facilitating soul-to-soul connection, which is what we are all about here at Shakti School. Yeah. She's got some core values that are really resonant with what we are doing at Shakti School, which is openness, warmth, professional excellence, wisdom, joy, grace, and style. Yolonda, welcome to the G-Spot.
Thank you. Wow, you really did do your research.
Well, I also, what I didn't say and what I'm going to say is I have a girl crush on her for a number of reasons. A platonic, as of now, a platonic girl crush. So the backstory of me and Yolonda, so I used to have a studio in town called the Shakti School, and she waltzes in there with this book in her hand, and or she saw this book, Mirabai Starr's Wild Mercy, and her daughter, so Yolanda came in with all of her children, and they were going to do a dance class in my space, and I think your daughter said something like, "Mom, like she's reading the same book as you," and so we knew like something must be up if we're both reading the same book at the same time.
Very esoteric, so to speak. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
It was a serendipitous moment. It was nice.
Yeah. So, and then Yolanda joined the Shakti School. And so one of the things that we also want to do here at the G-Spot, and you're sort of our first inaugural experience of this, is bring in women that we love from Shakti School and really let your voices be heard, because it's not just about, really at Shakti School, we have so many teachers, and we also consider, and this is something I'd love to get your perspective on as well. Like, we are a collective of educators, and we want to hold this space of leadership and wisdom, while at the same time acknowledging that we are a circle of women all bringing our own innate power and wisdom.
Right.
And so I guess that just to kick us off, like, I've been reading your stuff. And one of the things that really I loved that you had kind of come up with, that I think brings us into this idea of a woman and her innate wisdom and trusting that, is this idea that you have called cosmic contractions.
Yes.
And what I love about that is it's so clearly this feminine form. And so say more about that, and really maybe just start us off with your own background on how you got into spirituality yourself.
Oh my gosh. Oh, so many good, juicy questions at one time. Where to start?
Yeah, maybe start with your journey. Let's start with your journey. And what I'm truly curious about is, what was your background in spirituality or religion growing up, and how has that changed and shifted now?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for pinning me down somewhere. My very very bottom line is like, oh
yeah.
Okay. So I grew up the daughter of a holiness pastor and his wife, who was an evangelist, and so my marinade is this, and I think I've I think I may have listed this in my introduction inside the Shakti school group. I have a very masculine centered spirituality background. So I grew up with, men in leadership inside the traditional church. So if you were a purist in this particular denomination that I was in, that I grew up in, the Churches of God in Christ, women, like there was this fight. Like I remember coming of age during a time when women in leadership was becoming a polarizing sort of conversation and event. So women, coming into position of elder or pastor or teacher, or, that was a big thing. I remember that. But I don't remember having like much deep thought around it other than feeling uncomfortable by it. And that is really like how I grew up. And it wasn't until I think I was like 12 or 13. I remember coming into like, it was a holiday meal of some kind. I want to say Thanksgiving, may have been Christmas. I don't know, but I know I had been thinking. And I came into the space where all my loved ones were, my parents, my grandmothers, and, friends of the family, probably some church members fellowshipping. And I came in and I mentioned, guys, I've been thinking if I'm made in the image of God and I'm a girl, wouldn't that imply that God has some sort of like feminine characteristic? I mean, because you have to, I mean, and now, on the other side of it, it probably sounds strange to even come into a time where there's a question of that being true, but I did not grow up with a feminine like idea in language and in teaching about the presence and being of like any feminine aspect in word terms of their being, of God. And so just me like sort of intuitively like and logistically deducing like, hey, you guys teach me over and over again that I'm made in the image of God, and God is this very masculine idea in my head, but it seems like, that's incongruent to what I feel. And I don't remember it being received well.
Yeah.
It was very very old school, traditional. I love and honor, and I'm so grateful for the container that I was brought up in. At the time that I presented that question, it wasn't well received. And so I remember like burying it. I didn't feel safe to ask it again. And it wasn't until much later in my life that it was like I couldn't really fight or deny or quiet this hunger. And there were things that happened. I would meet people, much like meeting you, but just all along the way, of course, across the last, like, I don't know, I want to say the last 10 years, maybe a little more, of encountering people, just folks that would present along my path and give me a little breadcrumb, here or there. And then I would just dig and dig until I found myself, right in the middle of the conversation, and many conversations around the feminine aspects of God, and then God without like any sort of language or container, gender, like male or female or gender, right? Like, but so there seemed to be like this need for me to balance out the idea of masculinity with some concept of femininity. Absolutely. But then it goes away, right?
Exactly. We say that, I think your story is so resonant with our listeners. It's so resonant with me. I grew up Southern Baptist.
Oh, so well.
Oh, I know. And like, I remember being like, how do I navigate this emotional reality of being a young girl having periods and mood swings and all my feelings? I've always been a very emotional creature. And in my upbringing, as maybe yours, that emotional side, which is totally related to this idea of divine contractions. When I discovered Tantra, I learned that the goddess has many faces. One of them is fear. One of them is anger, wrath, and to be able to be like, are you kidding me? Like, God can be present in my emotions, and God gave me these emotions. That was huge for me. And that God can even be in these moments where we feel like we're being squeezed to death, and that we're maybe bad or have done something wrong, and we're getting this punishment experience that
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think of the one of the books I read early on in that journey that I mentioned, that little path or that leg of the journey. The Wild Woman, what is it? Women,
Who
the
run
women,
with
yeah,
wolves.
women who run with
Yeah,
wolves.
the
Thank you.
Bible of the divine feminine.
Right.
Yeah,
I remember reading that, and it's just like, oh my God, you know how you read something or you listen to something and you've never read it before, but you know it. Like you intuitively have this resonance. It's like, I know that that's true. So like being able to see that like down through time, when the author spoke about, you know, the wolf who may end her cub's life because she knows that, you know, the cub is not going to be able to make it, but just being able to have that wild in you to where you will do the things that are out on the edge, you know, that stuff that doesn't feel like the middle ground. You hang out near the edges and there's a lot of wisdom there, like those wild women who you know, deal with bones and herbs and death and isolation, and but there, you know, there's this picture of the tail coming down, you know, I don't know if you remember the image of the dress of the book. Woman's in this very fancy dress, but her tail is coming down.
Oh, that's
the
me.
dress.
Exactly. That is so me. But yeah, and like what that makes me think of is like, what does it mean to you to be wild?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I feel like I met this point, this very acute, and I'm sure that there's more of it there. But when I birthed my first child, there was this element, this, you know, obviously you enter into this space of you understand that it's much more than you. That's how it's much more than just me in this moment.
You are not in control
at all. And the level of force when you begin to experience contractions, and that meant that, you know, that goes into the point that you mentioned earlier. It was very important to me to give birth to my child unmedicated my first child, because I wanted to experience it, and I couldn't explain why to people, but I just had this urge and this like appetite for having a full sensory experience with that. And now, you know, 12 years later, I can see how that has been the template for so many things in life. But if you think about wild, I think about childbirth.
Yeah.
I think about sex. I think about brokenheartedness. I think about, you know, all of it just being cracked completely open. Those are the times in my life when I've met the wild and really became acquainted with myself in a state of wild, in a state of like, you know, undignified.
Undignified.
Yeah.
This is exactly how I've been feeling the past 2 weeks. It's so wild that we're meeting because we were going to meet before, and now it's perfect that we're meeting now, because I'm not really ready to share about it, but I will, I know at some point. But I went through an experience these past 2 weeks that for many women is an initiation. And it's related to our sexuality and our fertility and loss and death and grief. And Yolanda, I'm telling you, like, never have I encountered more of that sense of brokenheartedness and grief, and to just also see the way that it's also, and I wrote this down that you said, when you're in these divine contractions, you don't feel quite yourself, but you also feel more yourself than ever. And that's how I felt.
Yeah.
I just like, I am being melted. I am in this place, not of like fake humility, but of true humility of like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I don't see God's plan for me right now. I feel like a hot mess and I'm losing everything. And yet there's a rawness about me that enables me to see you differently, to see my neighbor different. Like it's clarifying to our perspective.
Yeah. So I mean, many people talk about it as a fire sort of experience. It's like the necessary burning, like farmers talk about when they are preparing a crop or a field to, you know, receive another crop. They burn. Some of them burn it through so that what's left, it's this purification process, and that's definitely what we, you know, especially those of us who are like, I don't know if you deeply search for meaning always when you're in a state of brokenness, but there's
too
just
much.
Like begging for like, why is this happening? Why is this here? And then when especially if you are a very sensing person, like you really sink into the experience to the depths of it, and you are at the edges. I remember, you know, in one of the seasons of my life, talking to a friend of mine, And I was like, I feel like I'm at the edge. Like, I just feel like I'm at the edge. Like, I'm at the razor's edge. I feel crazy. I don't know if I'm coming or going. I'm up. I can't sleep. I just feel like I want to burn things. Like, there's just all these things happening.
Been there.
And she's just like, yeah, your edges are beautiful. And I just remember like that one phrase being so affirming. And it reminds me of our girl Mirabai, who in her book says that beauty is not, I want to get the quote exactly right, but beauty is not limited to that which is pleasing. So her affirming to me,
yes,
yeah, right, like this idea that beauty has to be comely always is like a cultural imposition in our psyche. Like things that we go through, the wild, the brokenness,
the bloody,
the death, the dying, the loss, like all of that. This is all of this is life. All of this is. So yeah, definitely. When I was bringing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say when I was experiencing childbirth, like that, the power of those contractions and my inability to do anything at all to stop them. When my child was finally at the space where she was crowning and coming earthside, and we had already gone through hours of contracting, and it was different now. Like now I could feel the force of what is, and now this is my Shakti, like my I'm failing my test in this moment. The name of the force that is,
I'll tell you, Apana Vayu, downward flow. You don't have to know the Sanskrit, you just know it.
that is an undeniable force. I remember holding on, like I was holding on to things, like I couldn't. It was like this thing was happening in my body that was bigger than me, that was bigger than my body, that was bigger than the room, that was bigger than the hospital, but it was all concentrating itself in my womb space and bringing this life, and I couldn't do anything but let it happen. Like I couldn't.
I'm covered in chill bumps because, so let me give you one of the definitions of yogini is she who sits on the edges. And she who sits on the edges of society even. And then the definition and even like the cultural imposition we have of what a yogi is and what we see as like this peaceful meditating man in a cave all by himself. And I think about you and that story of childbirth and having seen all your children, including the ones that you've taken on now, and your husband, you're sitting in the chaos, the beauty and chaos of the everything. That is what the yogini is. It's almost like the women on the edge of a nervous breakdown almost.
Totally.
And yet,
that's right.
And yet, like, I mean, I have a new boyfriend in my life. We kind of got together. It's so funny. We got together literally March 27th. We were like, coronavirus, we're doing this together.
That's
crazy. Give it a shot. It's been crazy, but what's been so cool about that is to be with someone who has, through unexpected circumstances, seen so many of my faces as a goddess, the sexuality, the beauty, that I can be, and the wild woman who is breaking down, who is yelling, who is angry, and to have someone to be like, you know what, I see you. And it's okay for you to be this way. And I see that with you and your partner. You guys have done, I mean, obviously I don't know you guys very well, but I've seen your video. And to have an external person, whether it be a man or a woman, witnessing that goddess energy, that yogini fire priestess that we are, maybe talk to us a little bit about, I mean, because the way I see it is that it's my responsibility to cultivate that inner divine masculine that can hold me and witness me, because my partner is going to let me down, and sure enough they do, right? But at the same time, to be able to have that outer witness what that really can do for our spiritual path. Maybe speak to like how your relationship with your man has played a role in your spiritual development.
Sure, absolutely.
You're like, do you have all day?
Like, no, we just gush a little bit. But no, there hasn't always been that gushing either. Like, I mean, it's a very real journey. Like we've been together for 14 years. And we talk about our marriage or our relationship in terms of marriages, right?
Oh,
So
cool.
we have not had a divorce in a legal sense. Like there's not been a legal divorce, but we definitely had an end to one marriage. We had a limbo space, and then we have started again into another marriage. And I would say that for me, my partner has in that, I guess I'll speak in terms of that time frame. So in that first marriage, he was very much we had a very lateral relationship from a spiritual sense. Like we both had our separate spiritual journeys that we were making, but then they were very intertwined, very connected. And he was a leader very often, and I was more introspective and sort of watching him. He would demonstrate his spirituality a lot more outwardly than he does now. So I feel like it maybe I don't know if it's switched entirely, but initially we were like just sort of like moving more, I think a little more folded into each other. I guess it was a lot more folded and a lot less distinguishable,
like merged.
And then now, like, then there was this breaking point where everything just came undone, and that didn't work anymore. And then I had to dig very deep. I didn't dig at all. I feel like I was placed. Was thrown into the
down
depths of this,
yes.
into this situation where I then had to rely on everything I knew, plus learn more things to survive, literally to survive, to stay alive.
Wow.
And that called upon, all the things learning how to pray. That was, again, my marinade in church. My elders gave me that. I'm so grateful for language and for connectivity, being able to have awareness of something that I could reach with something that comes from my body, and this, that being words. But then I grew from that space and learned about so many more ways to reach God. And so that became like all that I wanted. I just needed to survive. I needed something to hold on to, and I needed something to rest in that was bigger than me. And so that is where I, found my strength and it was like this Phoenix experience, I think. And then my partner and I were very distant. We were living lives in a very distanced way. And I was decidedly in my own space and in my own journey and doing that. And I think that him being able to make his journey in the way that he did, giving me space, respecting my space, and then also making his own separate journey. We both were burned and came through this burning experience and have been made anew on the other side of it as two different people, separated from this merging thing that we were, and now individual, but then able to bear witness to each other's journey and support each other's journey and want each other to fully make that, whatever the journey is, to full actualization, full expansion. And we think of our marriage now as more of a meditation than anything. So
Yolanda, do you feel, because I'm such a mergy McPherson, like I'm like this strong, powerful woman who's like kicking ass, and then I meet a dude and I'm like, where am I? I'm inside you, and like I'm feeling all your feelings for you that you can't feel. And I'm really in my personal spiritual therapeutic journey working with that tendency. And I know it's such a common thing, not to make it a gender thing, but like for thousands of years, women's survival has been dependent upon men, and in so many ways. And so like now you mentioned like my survival depended on it, and you've now come out and created this own unique sense of self. Does it get any easier? Do you feel less merged into him now?
I definitely feel less merged into him and still
super
very connected and
even
close
more
to him.
Connected.
Like we have now it's a whole different experience. He's making his journey, I'm making my journey, and at the same time we're sharing this journey and bearing witness to each other. And
what
so
does
when
that
you
look like practically for you?
So that looks in practice, that looks like I have my things that I do in the morning when I get up. He has
non-negotiables
that he does in the morning when he gets up, and we give each other space. We honor each other's space. We talk with each other. Hey, what are you reading lately? Like, what are your reflections on like what you're picking up, and how's that landing with you? And he'll ask me the same sorts of questions, and we don't have any expectation for the other to participate in whatever it is that the other person is doing.
Wow.
It's very free flowing and fluid. And but still there's this symbiotic sort of thing. Like I may pick up something that he's listening to or something that he's reading, and he may do the same. And then likewise, as we're living out our practices and doing our lives, we're impacting each other. And there's this very organic, gleaning and like moving through and growing together. And there isn't this idea of like, you must do, or I must do, or we must do together.
With 4 kids, you have to feed them. And I know you're like the diva of homeschooling, and I want to talk about that for our listeners as well. Like that all sounds incredible. And I've been living with my partner for the past 2 months, and we don't have any children. And I'm like cracking up because I'm like, this word I highlighted when you said it, and that is expectations. Yes. And it's like, because I'm just like such a mother force. Like if you're at my house, I'm going to make sure you're fed. I'm going to make sure you're pee. If you get a cough, I'm going to make you an Ayurvedic lickable. Like I'm going to make sure that like your laundry's like, my tendency is to care give. Yeah. And the shadow side of that, AKA codependency, the shadow side of that is unconsciously I'm keeping score. And if you aren't showing up and doing for me in what unconsciously I deem to be this like equal exchange, then I'm resentful or I'm hurt. So like you guys have 4 kids. And so like practically, do you find that is it through deep communication, or is it just intuitive? Like
I would say it's a good mixture of both, because we do a lot of talking in this house. There are 7 of us technically. So I have, there are 5 dependents ranging from the ages of 16 down to 7. And then my husband and I, we definitely do a lot of talking, and that's always been the case. In fact, when you mentioned resentment and like the like tendency to give and nurture, I instantly thought of one of my daughters who is just like that. And we are always kind of, not always, but often raising to her awareness, like, do you notice? Because she'll get resentful. Like she'll show up in the house and she's like, she wants everything orderly. She wants her room a certain way. She wants dishes to be, done in a timely manner and in a certain way. And if her siblings are not helping in a way that is satisfactory to her.
So your daughter and I are like little soulmates. Right. Yeah. Is she the oldest?
She's not the oldest.
Oh, no, really?
She isn't. But she is the one that is much more a much more maternal spirit, which was surprising to me. I thought it was going to be my oldest child that was like that, but it's not. The child that I'm referencing, but has this definite resentment. Like she'll hold against her siblings, like the fact that they would have maybe come to ask, like, can I help you do so-and-so? And if they're not doing it in the way that fits her expectation or her desire, she'll say no to them, but then we'll hold against them that they didn't help. Right. So there's like that. So in a situation like that, in practical terms, that looks like us gently, raising into her awareness. Do you notice how you're feeling? Like, does it feel good to hold whatever that is? Is that what you want? And how is that playing on your relationship with your sister?
So Yolanda,
is that working for you?
With all your kids and in the morning, just thinking of my listeners and being so practical, like if Yolanda can do it, we can all do it kind of thing. Like, so are you just like, okay, it's the morning time, I'm getting my tea, I'm reading. I'm just so curious what your morning routine looks like and how, I mean, none of your kids are super little, but have you created this like sanctified space where you've set a boundary with them? So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is like, I want to know how you pray. Like, what does that look like to sit and have a spiritual experience? Because I can tell you what it looked like for me 10 years ago when I was entrenched in this like deeply patriarchal male yoga system. Right. And now I'm kind of doing my own thing. And one more thing I wanted to highlight that you said that's so meaningful to me, and I want to just highlight for our listeners, is the amount of respect that you have for where you came from in your religion, I've gotten there too. But initially I rejected it. And I think
Totally.
that next stage of the journey where you're like, thank you so much that I did grow up with singing hymns about Jesus, that I did grow up praying. And so all of that to say, what does your morning look like? How do you carve out that boundary? And then what does the practice look like? You know, share as much or little as you like.
Sure. Well, I want to first say, because I remember being a listener when I was in a different season of my life to conversations like this, and it being a thing where I felt like, oh my God, like there's no way that that's attainable. That's completely unrealistic. That doesn't fit me. And so I can't do anything.
As a mother.
Right. As a mother. I want to say that the iteration of like morning rituals for me has definitely developed and changed over seasons. So think about 12 years of mothering, right? And think about adding a different child to that every couple of years, every 2 or 3 years, it's going to look different each time. So now I have been able to curate a space for myself. So in my bedroom, very close to my bed, which works best for me, and close to my window, I have an altar space that has, for me, a pillow, a comfortable blanket, has many sacred texts here. I'm looking at it right now as I'm talking to you. I have some candles, I have some crystals, I have sage, palo santo, sweetgrass. I have my dry brush, and I have some symbols, and I have some sacred things that my children have given me for my altar. So they are in support of this space for me as well. And my husband has given me things for that space. That this has been something that I've been cultivating for the last, I want to say maybe 4 years. Initially, I used to slam into my mornings. Like there was no morning ritual. It was, I'm exhausted and I need this sleep. And so I went through a thing where I was beating myself up for not being able to get up on time, or not on time, quote unquote, for myself, so that I could have this time at the beginning of the day instead of at the end of the day. And it turned into this insomnia now because I'm trying to take or recoup time that I need to just be myself and by myself. It was landing at the end of the day and taking me into the morning, right? And then the day would just start over. So it was this not very healthy cycle years ago. So I realized, though, as my children got older and as I studied my way through the journey of raising them and trying to find the nourishing spaces throughout the day, I finally got to the place where bedtimes coincided, and I could keep the bedtimes at, right, 8:39, and everybody got to bed, and I could get to bed. I could get my time in, and then the time with my partner in, whatever administrative time I needed to have take place by the end of the day, and get into the bed by 10:30 or 11.
That's so big.
That's the goal. So big. And, it doesn't always happen because kids want to hang, they want to converse, they want to talk. We are in this unique familial experience where we have a new family member, and sometimes that bonding goes over. And so not every night is like that, but ideally I like to get to bed by 10:30 or 11. Lights out, phone down. Maybe I'm listening to something, but I like to be ready for bed, ready to connect with my partner or whatever by 10:30 or 11. And then the morning, sometimes when I'm in these spaces of like really trying to manifest something big and really trying to get clear on it, I tend to get up at like 5:45, 5:30. And that's usually when I'm trying to get clear on what I'm like I know there's something big that I want to come through, but I don't know exactly what kind of language to put. I don't know how to formulate it. So I'll get up super early. Now I'm getting up like 6:30. And what that looks like for me is I don't want to touch any. So a mantra that might be helpful is creative time before reactive time. So not engaging with my phone. In fact, maybe keeping it on the other side of the room, and not, just resisting any sort of tendency to check emails, to check alerts, to check anything like that. I have a phone that is for administrative purposes, and then I have a personal phone, but I try not to touch either. Sometimes I get up and I go straight to my writing practice. So I'll sit at my desk. I won't do anything but go straight to the desk, and I've prepared it the night before. So one ritual is I'll have my notebook out, and a pen to meet me the next morning. And I'll go straight there, light a candle, and just write whatever's there. There was a time where that time was devoted to writing down my dreams as soon as I woke up. And then I would write them in present tense and circle them, and, circle the feeling and circle the nouns that would show up. And I would use my dream dictionary, and I would, kind of linger and see what resonates and what messages are coming through perhaps in the dreams. Now I get up, and because I am very clear on what I'm working on in this season that I'm in, I'm very clear on what needs to happen. I don't use the time. I don't get up as early. I get up at around 6, and I do still come to my desk. When I come here, I have hot tea. So I want something that's ginger based or some hot water. So I'll go downstairs and turn on the tea kettle. I like the sound. So that like sensory experience of hearing the whistle of the tea kettle helps trigger for me. Okay, the morning is starting. You're going to stop and take good care of yourself. You're going to have some hot water. And you're going to put something in that hot water that's going to get your digestion going, raise your spirits and your energy. So sometimes I'll do a tea that lifts my spirits. And often it's one that just gets my body going. And then I'll come back up to the desk and go straight to the actionable. So I try to do 5 things a day for each of my things. Cool. I'll do in the morning, I do a lot of like catching up sort of admin things and preparation for the next half of the day. So my work day is divided in half. So I have the morning from like 6:45 till about 8:30. My children start stirring at around 7 or 8. Sometimes they want me to come eat breakfast with them. I'm trying to structure my life in this season so that I can be more present for more breakfast meals with my children. They can prepare their own foods now, even my 7-year-olds. And so they'll like get their own breakfast going. And then by the time 9 o'clock rolls around, I'm turning off the work phone, closing the laptop, coming down to be in the space with the children, opening up the shutters, getting ready for homeschool, the core academics of homeschool. So for us, homeschool is all the time.
Let our listeners know. So Yolanda and I we're gonna put this obviously out during the Corona time, but you've been homeschooling your kids before, and so I think that's another thing I really wanted to have our listeners hear, just what that looks like, and any tips you have for moms. Like I think of my sister-in-law, she's an architect. She's trying to work from home on her computer, and she has my nephew, baby Jack, who's 3, and like, what the F? I mean, I'm with them for like 2 hours, and I'm like, I do not know how you get any work done. So what do you have to say for our women out there that are entrepreneurial like you, or even who aren't, who suddenly have their kids?
Yeah, I want to say, like, first, breath. I seriously, like, I feel like if there were a church for breath, like, I would be like in that devout
I want to start that church. I'm trying to start that church in Charlottesville, actually.
Are you?
Seriously. Yeah, no. Seriously. You can be a part of it. Yeah.
This one word and this one concept has carried me through so many seasons of my life. It's carried me through death. It's carried me through carrying twins by surprise. It's carried me through like 9 months of bed rest with the twins. It's carried me through bed rest with the child. Before that, it's carried me through all these different transitions. But yeah, when my children were young, and now when they're still young, but not as young, being able to hold all the things, like I used to think of them as spinning plates, all the things that you have going on in your life. And then there's some upheaval, like COVID, right? Like you have to now figure out, how am I going to do my life? Like I can't. Maybe some folks freeze. I'm the kind of person that freezes when I get overwhelmed until I can get my bearings. So for that mom who's got the 3-year-old, or any child really, and you're working from home, I want to say that the ideal scenario is to be your own boss, so that you can, decide how you want to work in a day. You have more autonomy over your day, is what I need to say. And then second to that, if you can't decide how your hours work in your day, being able to communicate with whoever is your superior and just being very honest I know that we have this whole thing about being women in business and, you know, bosses not being accommodating and not really, you know, we don't want to talk about our pregnancies. We don't want to talk about motherhood because there has to be this very solid line between being a woman and being in the workplace. Right. But I think that the more we can make space and usher in and use our intuitive sort of like inclination when we're dealing one-on-one with boss figures, like to be able to communicate to them, I want to bring value to the work that I'm doing and to the larger work that you're doing. In order for me to do this work, I need to make shifts in my scheduling. I need to schedule my hours so that I can X, Y, and Z. And that will give me room and space to produce X, Y, and Z for you by this time. Like being able to communicate what
how
the
you're going to
expectations.
add value.
Right. And then once you've communicated that, now you have to deliver. So in order to deliver, you need systems, quote unquote, in place. So one example for me is, for instance, when I'm with my children, my work phone is off, like literally powered down. So I don't even hear the pings. I don't see the flashing, the buzzing. Yes. I'm with my kids and I'm fully with them. And if there is some project that I'm working on that causes me to deviate from that plan, my children are wonderful at holding me accountable to turning off the phone
Mommy,
when I'm with them. Right. And then when I'm over into work mode now, then I'm very clear. So I've put systems in place. I've been able to observe these are the things that are the barriers to me getting the work done. And this is what I need to put in place in order for this to not be true. So if that means, calling on my husband and saying, hey, babe, can you do, what I need from you is this, and this with the kids, or calling upon the older siblings with the younger siblings, or setting out some sort of loose checklist for the older siblings to make sure everybody is moving in some sort of rhythm. My kids have a lot of freedom in that our approach to education is largely self-directed, obviously not entirely because we do a whole lot of teaching, but then also they have a lot of liberty to choose what they want to study, how they want to learn it, and how they want to move through the day. We have baseline things that need to get done. So I may, make a checklist for them, or make some sort of, for the younger kids, some activity box, something that keeps them otherwise occupied so that my personal life can, for all intents and purposes, be on pause for a moment while I'm working on work. And then those work hours are very focused and intentional. So for me, if I'm easily distracted, I have a list that I make 5 things, right, for that I need to accomplish in that 1 hour or 2 hours. And I'm actively maybe it's cheeks in the seat that day. I'm feeling very flighty. I want to get up and do things. I may get up, but then I also need to bring awareness to the discipline to sit and focus and get this done. It sounds like,
so much strategic, when you have so much to create, which is we think of as this very feminine thing. I think people misunderstand this whole dynamic of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, in that to truly thrive in this, you are doing so much creativity. Not only do you have all these kids, but then you have all these projects creatively. Right. And for a woman to be able to do that, you have got to have such a strong masculine on board.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You absolutely do. In yourself on board, right?
In yourself.
And then ideally having it also in your space. Yeah. And, maybe you may not have a partner per se, like a live-in sort of husband or partner. Who are your friends? I just believe in
who
village.
Plays that role?
Who can do that for you, right? Trying to take inventory of the people that are in your life, who can be present in that way to help be that sort of, I call it an edifice when I think about it. I remember coming through with my first morning, writing this conversation around building an edifice or a structure inside which creativity can be concentrated and flow. So it's not overflowing. It's not becoming exhausted anywhere because it's there's no boundary there. There's something that's holding it, but then it's free and concentrated and most potent inside a structure of some kind.
Shakti needs structure.
Yeah. So who can do that? What can do that? What systems can do that? What kind of schedule can do that? What people can you pull on and invite in to be supportive? Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and getting help. I mean, I really think it takes a village, especially when you have
Totally.
children.
Mhm.
So, pivoting a little bit, one of the things that we're like, one of the definitions of yoga is to make that which you are unconscious of, now you're conscious of.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I wanted to make sure we have time to talk about, you're a woman of color, you're a member of the Shakti school. And I even remember you and I talking beforehand, and you were like, okay, like, this is my body as a colored woman of color. I'm having this experience. How has, and yet when I look at you, I see this many faces of the goddess, and I see,
Mhm.
I see the fact that you're a woman of color, and I see all the ways in which you are this thing that has also nothing to do with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what I'm curious about, we did a project 2 years ago where we had this woman come on. We hired a gal from LA, and I said, like, teach me, show me how I can offer something that's appealing to more women of color, because we don't have women of color signing up for this thing. And women of color are not coming to my yoga teacher trainings. And it's not just me, it's like across the board.
Mhm.
And she was so awesome. Her name was Gina Gomez. And she was like so kind and loving with me. And then I paid her a lot of money to basically lovingly show me all the ways in which we were unconsciously maybe repelling people.
That's awesome.
And it was like one of the hardest things and one of the most beautiful things we've ever done. And we're still
Yeah.
in it. Like we're
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, like we're trying, And so we did a scholarship program. We have so many more women of color now in Shakti school. And so we saw this like outcome from this project. I'm curious, as a person who's in Shakti school, but not only our school, like, you're so interested in this whole world of spirituality, of advancement on that spiritual level. How do you see that the limitation, what is the barrier to entry that maybe we're not seeing? How can we help the women who have businesses attract more women of color, be more open to it? It's so challenging because on my end, I'm like, this is something that I want so deeply to understand, and yet I know that that's not my lived experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so maybe talk about, and at the same time, I'm also like, I don't want you to feel like you are like, have to educate me. That's my job to do that for myself. So it's this very tenuous, tricky realm to even talk about it. And
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know what my question is to you. I think it's just more, oh my God, I want us to all be together and to move into this next level of the age of Aquarius, where it's like, we're together again. We're not separate. And yet
Mhm.
there's so much division right now. How do you see all this huge thing that I just laid out on
Yeah.
the table?
No. Well, firstly, thank you for coming into the discomfort, because I know that it is uncomfortable. Thank you for asking me beforehand if this is okay to talk about. That makes me feel honored in the space of being someone who, like, doesn't want to hold the whole thing all the time and doesn't want to be the voice and representative. So thank you for having that awareness of being able to ask me first, before addressing this question on the air. But I think that the willingness to come into the discomfort is, on all sides, the first step. The courage to be able to take the step into the discomfort, and then being able to sit in the discomfort is the next step. Right? Like, it makes you want to squirm, it makes you want to leave, it makes you fumble your words,
It makes me
you
want
like
to cry.
Yeah, so all of that. So there's so many things that come in, that are in this discomfort space, that is generations old, and deeply rooted. It's in the fiber of our being. It's in our DNA. It's everywhere, right? It's pervasive, and it's insidious. And being able to acknowledge that and sit with how that all feels, and not try to make it go away, and not try to give it to anybody else to hold, but to be in there together. I'm talking about all sides. So I have many peers, many women who identify as Black, many men who identify as Black, many people that I know that identify as people of color, and many white people who identify as white, who are tired to the point of unwillingness to enter into the conversation because we're expecting people to just know. We're expecting people to just figure it out. We're expecting people to like have it like ask somebody else sort of thing.
Right.
I think there has to be like this. In my upbringing, there was this. I don't know if it was a scripture, but it was something that was often said: "The strong bear the infirmities of the weak." And I just have this idea of it being cyclical. Like,
yes,
there are times when I'm going to feel strong enough
to hold it.
And then there are times when I'm absolutely exhausted and I don't want to, like, I'm trying to like hold my own rage. Like, this is recent actually, even that I was in my own safe spaces. Like, I saw something come across my news feed and I need help with holding this. I need help with getting it all back to a space where I can move and navigate and not be filled with the sort of energy and seeing it in a way that is destructive. So I think that there's this cyclical holding, cyclical strong bearing up, cyclical like take rest on all the sides. So, but the main goal is we have to do it. We have to have the conversations. We have to ask the questions. We have to come into the uncomfortable space. We have to invite people in through scholarship, like you're saying, because we have to acknowledge the very real facts of marginalization and like economic disenfranchisement that goes back. We have to acknowledge that as being a truth, and then we have to put money in place. That's one thing. And then being able to appreciate that just if we are looking with our natural eyes, when we come into a space that feels white, if you're a person of color, it feels predominantly white, it's like pervasively white, then there is not a feeling of safety with that. And so you don't feel like you can open up. You don't feel like you feel safe. Like there's this, okay, well, I'm going to come into this because this is what I do every day. But you're not coming into it with the same level of soft, like, and openness that you would come into a space where you felt safe enough. So people who curate the space, not just Shakti school, but any space, because I've had this conversation, all kinds of spaces, like, that are yoga related, that are like homeschool related, that are relational. It doesn't feel that the understanding is you have to know that by sheer virtue of it being a space that is more white than Black, it's not going to feel safe. It's going to feel like every other space. And if we're talking specifically about America, where the predominance, where the default is this idea of like white as being the default. And so if you are not aligned with that, all of the connotations and denotations that come from this idea of whiteness smack you right in the face when you come in as a person of color. So you are deterred, or you don't feel like you can really bloom or open unless you decide, unless you have, enough energy at the time to press through that.
Yeah.
So for instance, like, if you are a white woman or a white man who is in a space like that, you can know that, right? Like you can have that awareness. And then if you feel brave enough, ask the question.
I feel I know. And I feel so happy to like, when like I think of the Bible verse, to whom I don't even know if it's a Bible verse, but my mom would just always say it to me, so I assume it's a Bible verse: to whom much is given, much is required.
Much is required, yeah.
And when we first started doing Shakti school, I'll admit there was a part of me that was like, why do I have to do this? Because I know my heart. And I know that I love all beings and that I'm open to all beings. Like I know that in my body. Why do I have to go out? And I had one of our teachers, actually, a woman of color, and she was like, look, I love you. I know your heart, but the internet doesn't know your heart.
Right.
And she was like, when I'm on, she was going to market our stuff because she's one of our yoga teachers. She's like, I'm appalled. Your marketing has no women of color in it. And I honestly was like, holy shit, she's right. And to actually empathy, compassion. And so I started going to the African American Baptist church here in town, where I was many days the only white person. And I I did that because it's amazing, but also because I wanted to have that feeling of what would it be like to be a white person in a Black space. And I don't think most white people in this country even know what that feels like. And of course, everybody was nice to me. But what I'll also say is, our human nervous system, we sense one another.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what I'm thinking or feeling in my heart. My nervous system can sense when there's someone in front of me that doesn't fully trust me, or that does have judgment, or even anger. And that can be, and I've had other African American friends be like, there's a part of me that's angry at you.
Absolutely.
And I don't even know you at that point. And I'm like, wow, my system can feel that. And so then what does my nervous system do? Get defensive.
Yep.
And then guess what? We never truly come together. And so I think another interesting conversation is like the nervous system dynamics of this, and trauma, and like how we're all dealing with a trauma around it from these really different angles. And to kind of, if we can work with that body-based level, like you said, step into this discomfort of it, acknowledge it. And also, when I see some of the things online, the narrative at times feels somewhat continuing more anger, hatred, rage. And at the same time, my tantric woman brain and the woman inside of me that's trained in trauma understands, like when I see these young African American transgender kids at these universities just raging at their teachers who truly don't have anything to do with their pain, right? And seeing that rage and going, I get it. I understand, because I'm not African American, but I know what it feels like to be abused. And I know what it feels like to hate, for example, a man just because he's a man. And so like, how do we navigate this in a way where it feels authentic, and that I'm not just like, what's the word, like virtue signaling? Like, I hate that. Like, I'm like, I don't want anybody to think that we're just putting images of people of color on our site because we're virtue signaling.
Yeah.
It's so freaking tricky, Yolanda. Like,
yeah.
How do we stay authentic? Like, I don't want to just say all the words that, I follow a lot of women of color who are talking about white fragility and the toxicity of whiteness. And there's a part of me that even Maya Angelou talks about, like, don't call anybody toxic. Like, that's going to create a nervous system response in people where then they become defensive and build up even more walls. And that's the like nuanced, super tough conversation to have, because it would be super easy for me to be like, oh yeah, just give me the words to say and we'll start saying them.
Yeah, I think that it's going to take, and because you and I know, right, when we are in the face of difficult things, when our meditation, when our practices come into real life,
yes,
when the breath comes into play, and the times when it's very uncomfortable and in fact painful to be in a space, it's just where it's like this, employing these things. So you gave the example of the teacher who's got this young person raging in front of them, that doesn't feel in their self that they are at fault for anything directly,
totally,
immediately, but just being able to, if I were, for instance, that teacher and someone were raging at me, being able to say yes, right? Like, have a boundary so that I'm safe, right?
Yeah,
physically, but I am saying yes to this person's experience to the degree that I am capable, right? So all of us having some level of willingness to know that all of this stuff is stored up and pent up and has never come really fully to being realized, processed, digested. So it's like popping up, and then it's also continuing. So it's so complicated. And so I think that if the question is, how do we do the work? We have to breathe into the moments that are very uncomfortable, the moments where we don't feel at fault necessarily, being able to be curious about, am I, like, on all sides, like, what am I doing in this scenario? Even the person who's raging, are you helping this, right? Your feelings are valid and true and real. Also ask yourself, what am I doing to, get us to a different place, to a healthier place, the person who's raging and the person who's witnessing the rage. What am I, like, implicit in this at all? Like, is there any level at which I could be complicit, right? and being able to say yes, and being able to acknowledge that, and being able to be, just interrogate, like, what is it? How do I have a part in this? And how can I bring us to a healthier place in the moment, like real time, in the moment, real time? Because it's impossible to look at the whole thing. It's generations deep and long and wide, right? Like,
and like the one-on-one, like, I think me and you sitting here and me sending you the email today being like, look, I want to talk about this really tender thing. And you saying, all right, thank you for asking. And then me saying, and it's uncomfortable. And you going, yeah, I know it's uncomfortable. And like, just doing that.
Yeah.
The alchemy is happening. Like, I can feel it. Like there's a bond. We're kind of creating just this very tender initial tentacles of, I kind of start to love and trust you a little more, because I've been able to say what's real for me. You've been able to start to share what's real for you. And like, imagine if we did that all the time together.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does, there is this line, I think, and again, I say line, I don't want to say line because that word makes me feel like there's some, like it's a hard thing that you encounter, but it's like this little bit of a dance that you do when, again, because we're human, like there are times when I've had in my life, for instance, people who want to say to me or want to ask me questions, and they're just like, they don't ask permission first. They just go to doing, or they go to asking things and, making me the spokesperson for all of this group of people that is not monolithic. Right. And that's I don't want to hold that. I don't want to be that.
And you're an individual. Like, right. I don't know what you believe in. I don't know what you think about anything, and so I so understand that, like, wanting to be made the like spokesperson thing is a way of dehumanizing you, and not, and you could be like, well, you know what, Katie, you don't know about this, but I'm just this Republican. I voted for Trump. I mean, I don't think that's true, but
I can say anything. I can say any number of things.
Right. And and I do really think that, like, the answer is like 1-to-1, like get off Instagram. I mean, I think Instagram can be a powerful education tool, but like maybe get off Instagram and ask permission to have an uncomfortable moment with someone that isn't like you, whether it be a person of color or just somebody like, hey, what would it look like? And I've done this, by the way. Like I matched with back 2 or 3 years ago, I matched with a guy on Bumble. And we went on a date, and he was really hunky, and like, I was like, oh yeah, like he's so nice, blah, blah, blah. And like, second date, I found out that he voted for Trump. And I was like, no effing way. Like he, for me, was like a hard no. Yeah. And instead of doing that, I was like, you know what? I'd never asked somebody, why did you do that? And we ended up he ended up not being my man, but like, right. We ended up having a 3-hour conversation in which I yelled and cried, and he kept staying with me. But all this to say, Yolanda, it enabled me to understand their perspective. And it helped alleviate the rage that I felt at anyone that would have voted for Trump.
Yeah, so, you needed to get it out. Yeah.
And to have those uncomfortable moments.
I sat down with some flaggers, the people who carry the Confederate flags and sit in protest in spaces. And I won't say where I was, but I was in the world somewhere. And I was walking to my destination, and I happened to be on like a sabbatical. Like I left just for some rest. It was a reactive sort of rest. It wasn't proactive at all, but it was good. Anyway, I was going somewhere to be a part of my rest sort of weekend. And there were these people. And so I sat down with them. The closer I got, the more I could hear like the men in my life telling me to turn around and get back in my car. I could hear them in my ears. But I felt a sense of like, I don't know, I just felt a sense of courage and confidence, and also intuitive leaning to just keep pressing. And I went and I was walking because they were in my path. They were in the way of the thing that I was walking to. And I stopped, and the kind of, if you know me, like, I don't generally just walk past people in close proximity and not say hello or not, make some sort of acknowledgement. So I said good morning to them, and they said good morning to me. And then I stopped. I kept walking a little bit. Then I stopped through the like corridor of the people who were holding the flags, and I looked at one of them. And I was like, I have to ask you guys, like, why are you doing this? Like, what is this about for you? And that began like 2-hour long conversation where one of them was under a shade tree, and he came and pulled out his seat and he like put his chair down. He's like, here, sit here, so you're not in the hot sun. And gave me cry. A place to sit, and I sat and I talked with them for 2 straight hours. And the conversation, went a whole lot of places. But I remember like people were driving by honking at us. They were honking at the men and the women who were standing out there. And then there was a jogger, a white man came by, and he stopped and asked me if I was okay. And one of the flaggers was like, well, why are you asking her if she's okay?
Don't you know that she's a powerful woman, can take care of herself?
Well, no, I think he was like, because these people that I talked with, this particular group, did not feel, they felt very misunderstood, right? So this is a whole thing we could get into at another time, another conversation. But I was sitting and listening to their story, which is what made me raise this. It came up in my consciousness as you were talking. I sat down with these people I've never talked to ever, but always been taught and always seen in history, like, images, and read books of like what this flag means.
Yeah.
What it's a symbol of, and what these people must think and believe if they're holding this flag.
Yeah.
I never actually had a conversation with a flagger. And so ideals and our level of agreement notwithstanding, I was able to have a human interaction with these people. And, the guy who was coming through, the white man jogger who was checking on me as the black, very brown skinned Black woman sitting with the flaggers, was concerned, making sure that they weren't threatening me in any way. And I didn't feel threatened. I was sitting there very like confidently and openly, and they were as well. We were having like a conversation like you would at some sort of, I don't know, I won't say like a barbecue or anything like that, but it wasn't, I didn't feel threatened. And and they actually said to me, because I was on my way. I think I had to teach something that day as well. They're like, I think you would make a really good teacher. You listen really well and you talk really well, and I really hear what you're saying to me. And I don't know if I have listened to people in this way before, as one of the women said to me. And I was just like, wow, look at this moment that we're all in, right? Like, I know the full weight of this. I'm completely aware. I know the energy that's swirling around us. I know, like this guy thought that I was not safe. Like this person witnessing me in this scenario doesn't think I'm safe, like, but I feel safe.
Immediate reaction from the outside world.
Because of this narrative, because of the story, right? But like you said, the willingness to, again, not put ourselves in situations. I want to be really careful, because I remember my husband was really bothered. He was so angry when he learned that this happened. But maybe we don't all go to those extremes, and maybe some of us do. I have some cohorts that go exactly that far. And I have some that, I feel like for me, my work when I'm not sitting with flaggers is to raise people who are compassionate and respectful, and who are also unashamed and unapologetic to be who they are and to be themselves. And I'm teaching them to acknowledge, people at whatever journey place they find themselves. So you encounter someone who you disagree with, instead of assuming judgment or taking a position of judgment, observe, or keep going, or ask a question, stay curious, and stay courageous enough to hold what's uncomfortable and not try to change it because it makes you more comfortable.
It makes me think, and I think this is why you and I were initially drawn to one another. Like, what I feel is missing from the whole conversation out there that I've been so tuned to these past few years is that Tantra says that when you're touching the paradox, you're close. When you're in the paradox, you're close to truth. And so that duality of, like, like I hear a lot of the narrative is like, don't go straight to love and light. I need to talk about the pain. You know, don't send me into that love and light. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Love and light are still pretty cool. So like, can we, and I think maybe this is a good place to shift a little, like, can we hold those two things all at once? That here's Yolanda, here's Katie, grew up in actually pretty interestingly similar situations religiously, one a woman of color, one a white woman, that aspect informing our experience in such a deep way. And can we hold that uniqueness of the individuality and make that so worthy of being understood and heard and not diminished in one iota? And at the same time say to you, and guess what else? There's this part of us that is so beyond that is this infinite spirit. And I think that lack of the spirituality that, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King talked about, little white boys and little white girls being able to sit together. And like, I still feel like that's my dream. And can you hold that as the dream that, you know, like in Brazil, they're all mixed. Nobody, you know, Brazil has like a very different relationship to color than we do in the United States. I think way more enlightened than us. Like, can we hold that dream of unity while at the same time being like, and we have so much work to do to process this pain?
Yeah, that last part being the kicker. Yeah, absolutely. I think there has to be. Otherwise, we would all just be tearing each other up.
And depressed.
There has to be some holding
hope.
Of like hope and envisioning a different kind of space. You know, I do struggle. These are conversations that we have in our home and family. Who knows what the world will be like. But I do hold a very specific awareness of being in this body wrapper and also knowing who I am, right? As being infinite. Yeah. But I am in this body wrapper, and this whole, like, and there are things that are still unanswerable, I think, because the idea of race being something that isn't even really real, but it's still so real.
I mean, you know, Amarie that runs Shakti school, people call her white. And she's like, this conversation is so damn difficult because with me and you, it's a little more obvious, but Amarie is 1/2 Dominican and grew up Dominican. Dominicans are a whole nother culture. And she feels it and talks about it and writes about it, like her father's side. And yet when people see her, they think and call her white. And so like, it's so uncomfortable and difficult because at some point, hopefully soon, like it may be less of an issue as we continue to like be with one another. And, you know, thank you so much for letting me go there with you. I just appreciate it. And I'm not a woman of color, but I know what it feels like to be the person that people go to with their emotional distress. With Shakti school, you know, I get it.
I know you must know.
Oh, mama. Yeah. To the point where, you know, I know what doing emotional labor for people, not even professionally, but personally feels like. And so thank you for letting me ask that. And I want you to know personally, like, I know that I can hold it with you and for you. If that ever is something that I can do, like, you've got an open invitation, and I'm willing to go there. Like, let's get uncomfortable together.
Well, I will say, I want to offer to you before we pivot again or change or transition away. Yeah. This idea of like identifying and being able to come with a sense of awareness, like to like lead with awareness. So I have this very close, I won't say very close, but I have an associate who teaches this awesome sort of thing. I think it's called Holding Whiteness Responsibly.
Great title.
She, every time I speak with her, and every time I notice her in conversation, she always asks, like, how do you identify? She asks people that, how do you identify? And I noticed that years ago. And that's something that I have tried to find ways to adopt into my own language and awareness, not just with race, but also gender. and like how people are showing up, like what would you like to be called? That being an opportunity for people to say, this is how I see myself in this moment, right? Like I see myself as a Black woman. That's there's like this subtle difference between being a woman of color and a Black woman, in that the spaces that we occupy and the things that we think about and the stories that we have are so similar, but then also have these very important subtle differences. So like identifying as a Black woman is something that's important for me, because it connects me to a level of kindredness that being a woman of color does not always.
Right. It's such a big grouping, whereas this feels more like a home.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a home, but it feels most right. It's interesting. Like, it's like this thing that it's like, when I say I don't know if it feels like a home, it's because I'm Black. And I'm very proud to be Black. Some of us would say blackity Black, right? Like, it's this thing where like, I am Black, make no mistakes about it. I may not look like you think Black should look, or listen to what you think Black should listen to, or eat what you think Black should eat, but I'm Black. And that's how I see myself when I am identifying myself as something other than infinite, something other than womb bearer, carrier, you know, something other than like, I'm Black. That's how you identify me ethnicity wise. And then coming to grips with holding all of what that means for me, even in my adult life, like it's taken on a whole new meaning, and it still doesn't quite feel like home. Like there are all these things, this ever shifting, like, you know, thing, but it feels most right.
So it sounds like it would be helpful if people would take the time to ask what might feel difficult for people, to ask the question, hey, like, what do you identify as? And that immediately it makes me think, well, what do I identify as? And it's such an interesting thing to even ask yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I know so many people who are misidentified that it feels like it would be it would bestow dignity to more people to have people take the time, just like you ask when people have long names that are not maybe, you know, something that is culturally what you are. Your mouth has muscles to be able to say, but being able to take the time to say, learn. Please teach me how to say your name properly. I want to honor your name. You know, that's something that I do. Or you know, I teach again, I go back to teaching the kids, but when you're talking to someone that has a really thick accent, not getting all, maybe it is frustrating, but not letting that be what leads you. Taking the time to acknowledge that their language is different, but that doesn't mean that they're not a smart person. It doesn't mean that they're not saying something worth hearing. It doesn't mean that they can't help you. It means that you slow down. It means that you take the time and bestow dignity and say, can you please respectfully repeat what you said? I want to hear you. So
I
being
love
able
this
to
idea of bestowing dignity.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, I just think that if we did that more as humans, we saw each other more, like we took the time to just stop rushing and darting around so much and thinking that everything that I know is all that there is to know, and this is the right way to know stuff. Like, I'd be open to asking questions and being soft enough to hear, like being soft enough to receive. This is how you correctly pronounce my name. This is what I'm actually saying. This is what it means. Right. And if you don't want to ask and being ready for someone to say, no, I don't want to tell you that, or no, I don't, like, just being ready for people, like being ready for whatever may come, and not expecting it to be a certain way, expecting it to feel good, expecting it to be easy, expecting it to go, like, you know, fluidly. It may not. You just have to be ready for any of it.
One of my teachers says, soft outer body, firm, strong inner. And I really feel like my work is to be able to be like, you know what? I want to know your perspective. I don't have to agree with 100%. But the act of being soft and receiving, I know who I am, you know, having that firm inner core. And I think because what she said was, oftentimes we're walking around with a hard outer, and a completely mushy inner.
Mm-hmm,
But like
mm-hmm.
when I'm strong in myself and I know my heart and I know my intention, that's the inner strength that can enable me to be curious and soft and be like, hey, Yolanda, like, what do you identify as? Hey, Yolanda, can I have your permission to talk to you about those? Are all like, I have to get vulnerable to go there.
Yeah, no, it's work. It's real work.
It's work.
It's work. But coming from abundance. Again, it goes back to all these things you and I know about that I don't know if I'm learning. Like, I feel like when it comes to like concepts that yoga, like the idea of yoga, the idea of mindfulness, the idea of like awareness, consciousness, a grounded center, like that, you're coming from abundance. When you can truly embody that life and have that be how you're moving through your life day to day, moment to moment, your endeavor is to come from a place of abundance and not scarcity or fear. You're able to hold more when you can do that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, do you identify as a musician? As a music priestess,
music participant. I identify as a singer. So people identify me as musician. I sing. I identify as a singer because I actually don't play any musical instruments with my hands, and my voice and my body. So my body is percussive for me, but the voice is where that's just kind of what has always been there. When I became conscious of anything, the voice was there. So
your voice is, I want everyone to know about. I want to, maybe a good place to kind of wrap up is, I was so inspired and girl crushed out on you when I heard your YouTube videos. And in particular, there was a song called Gray. And in it, you say so many things that I would love to just read and quote. But like, I guess the one that touched me the most was, I'm learning how to be unapologetically me.
Yeah.
That just feels like it sums up so much of what we're attempting to do at Shakti School, of what we're talking about when we have these difficult conversations. What role has music played in being a singer in this journey of healer woman?
Yeah, singing over myself. Being able to participate in what happens when I sing over other people, and sing too. And I have to come again to my children who ask me to sing to them. Like, each night, please sing to us. And when they're scared, can you sing? Like, witnessing the power of the voice, I think has called, because there was a time in my life where I was like, I don't even want this. I don't even care, because people were just attaching to me. Like, there wasn't this, I didn't have an understanding, an ability to separate myself, an ability to say no to, I just was learning so much when I was younger. It's like, I don't want this thing that's drawing all this attention to me.
I don't want this incredible gift that's like literally everyone, we're going to put some of Yolanda's clips up. Like, your voice is sick, dude.
Oh man, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I definitely am just now in my adult life better able to hold my own voice. And that is true in so many ways. But when it comes to singing, I'm just now getting to a place where I'm able to stand in my body and flat-footed and release my body from my voice and feel okay about it. And feel good about it and be able to truly benefit from it. I would say that writing music, being able to write songs from some of my darkest places and some of my lowest places, and even from, just moments of like, the muses are there and the melody comes and then the words come. Like, I don't play any instruments. I just listen for what's trying to come through. And every song that I've released that is an original of mine has come that way. And so I trust that the message, because it comes from my experience, it comes from my life and my living. So when I hear it, like, there are songs that people play back to me and I'm just like, oh my God, I love that song. And I wrote it and it's ministering to me. It gives me goosebumps, or it makes me cry, or I'll just sit and it's washing over me. Then I know that it's bigger than me. Yeah, totally. I know that I'm a vessel. And I also know with that also, like, I'm a vessel also, like, not just that. Like, I'm not this thing that's just
empty
here.
thing.
Right. You know?
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm here too. Whereas before in my life, I don't know if I completely had that full awareness. Cause again, I was ready to just detach. Like, I don't even want this because I don't feel any other parts of myself being seen by anyone else. I know I'm here, but then I began to question, am I here? Like, is there a me too that is also a part of this being that has this voice? So I think I've been able to come into to fully stand in more in my power as whatever it is, all the things that make me Yolanda. And I haven't always been able to do that, but music has definitely a joy thing now. Whereas before it was labor, and it was the source of a lot of discomfort and pain and fear, and sometimes like, scrutiny and all kinds of stuff. I had so many negative associations with music, not all music, but my music and my own voice. So.
Wow, that's such a powerful teaching, because when you hear you sing, I wouldn't ever imagine that, because when I hear you sing, I think, oh, wow. I mean, I'm a good singer. I'm a musician as well. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'll give you my chant CDs, because when I was going through my personal thing I went through these past couple of weeks, I started playing back and I never listened to my own music. I just put it out there, and I turned on, I did it with a friend that we co-created this album, and I listened to one of our chants, and it was the Devi Ma. They're basically mantras with some words, and I just wept because I felt like all that labor that went into that album, if it were only for this moment in time in my life, for me to hear this chant, this was ministering, as you use that word. This was for me.
Yeah.
And I think that, I tell my students, we're all singers. It's like a tiger learning how to roar. It's just in us. And this idea of singing over ourselves and singing over one another is really important. And I encourage everyone out there listening to just walk around your house singing to yourself, letting it flow.
Yes, the same.
Yolanda, thank you. This has been just so beautiful, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And I want to give just a moment, to let people know you do life coaching. Tell us about your specialty. What do you want to let our listeners know if they want to connect with you?
Totally. So what I specialize in is healing and empowerment centered awareness. So being able to learn for yourself through somatic awareness. So bringing awareness to your body and the sensations that you feel, and using that information to inform your choices. I teach breath work. So we talked about breath in this conversation, but I teach people how to breathe, how to calm, how to center, how to move through difficult things with the breath. And I teach communication, and essentially just bringing the part of you that is whole into your everyday life. And my clients tend to be people who have children. That's very difficult work. Parenting work is hard. And also people who are in relationships. So relationship as meditation, my husband and I do that work together. But primarily my work in this season is with individuals who are working from home and doing so with children, and also having to think about school at home. So, there are so many unknowns when we think about the fall semester of 2020 for kids in the US, kids all over the world, I'm sure. There's a lot of concern. People are like, oh my God, like I have to do fall. I can't even do this. Like I have it's not working. So I am about to launch a program where folks can check in to learn about the logistical side of, thinking through homeschool, and then building a toolbox for yourself, so that as you are learning these things and moving through the process of making your decision, you can make your decisions from a grounded place, from a place of abundance, like what we mentioned earlier. So if you're having, this exchange with a child who may be upset, or just, experiencing their own very big emotion because their whole life has changed as well, that you're able to come in as the adult figure and partner with them and bestow dignity to them and help them make a decision, and make a decision for yourself and schedule your day. And, so so that sort of support will be ongoing in the summer and fall of 2020 as well.
Sounds like something a lot of people would need. So y'all reach out to Yolonda. She's at yolandajonescreative.com. We're also going to put links to that in the show notes. And yeah, I think from the little that we've discussed around it, it sounds like, I don't have kids, but I think that it sounds like you help people get some structure around it. And I think that's invaluable.
Definitely some power in it. I'm telling you, these kids, parenting is not for the faint of heart. Bringing intentionality to parenting, any sort of relationship, really.
Right.
But children are different.
And I can attest. I've met your children, and my impression, I've met them several times, and not deeply, but like witnessing them, and I'm like, these kids are different. Like they're awake. And so I can attest to like the power of whatever you've been doing. Like they seem more mature, they seem more awake, they seem just more able to connect. So you're doing something right, lady.
I appreciate it. So the coaching will be from a perspective of like, maybe I didn't choose homeschooling. I didn't really want to do this, but here I am. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
It chose me. How do I do it? So, that's where we're meeting folks.
Well, thank you, lady. This has been a joy, and I look forward to ongoing conversations.
Yes, more and more. It was great. I'm glad I got to connect with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda.
फूटे फूल अपन सुखे फूटे फूल